special partnership with and brought to you by our friends at FLYN. Today at Soulfront, I speak with Alex Putici, founder and member of Alberta's largest co-working community, which is called Work Nicer. Alex keeps busy as an entrepreneur and serves various community building organizations. In our conversation, we explore what it means to support entrepreneurs, how it's felt on the ground, what he's learned, and how co-working is surviving, changing, and adapting. So, without further ado, let's get into the show. Alex, thanks so much for being part of the show. I appreciate you taking the time. I just want to go into a little bit of your background. You founded Work Nicer in 2015. It's grown to Alberta's largest co-working community with over 400 members. And it's really been an oasis in a lot of ways for entrepreneurs who are growing and starting their business. So thanks for that, man. I appreciate it. The topic we'll go into today is a passion of yours and something that you do definitely through Work Nicer, and that's supporting entrepreneurs. And Work Nicer's motto of "No one succeeds alone" is wonderful. I love that motto. You know, I'm interested into going into co-working in terms of it surviving, changing, adapting. But before I go into that question, I'd like to talk about just the entrepreneurs in your workspaces. You know, when you think of entrepreneurs, you typically think of people who are passionate about learning, folks who want to change the world. You know, in your own words, can you describe the Work Nicer community?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think to me, it is motivating and inspirational and the reason to keep going. But I think it is like, ultimately it is this togetherness, right? Which is where our whole "no one succeeds alone" comes from. And so it's this place where no matter what you do or where you're from or how old you are, what industry you're in, it's like everyone's going through the same thing. It's like this amazing equalization where you have people that are doing all sorts of different stuff and have all sorts of different backgrounds and are at different stages in their business. But everyone gets together and shares a coffee or shares a beer and swaps stories, and everyone has something to learn and everyone has something to teach. And that's like the most amazing community thing that I think a person could hope for.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you think of the importance of small business, like I have there's this 2019 small business report from the government of Canada, and they talked about, you know, the total economy, has 1.18 million businesses, and about 98% of those were small businesses, 2% medium, and less than 1% were large businesses. And those small businesses generated about 42% of Canada's GDP. So like, there's definitely an economic argument for keeping a strong small business sector. But like, why do you think it's so important that we keep a strong entrepreneurial group?
Well, I mean, I think if we do want to talk economically, it is truly the backbone. I think for a long time, the word or the phrase like "small business is the backbone of our economy" has been purely like this catchphrase political thing. I don't know if anybody has actually stopped to think about how important it truly is. And even most recently, I was reading an article, I think in the Times, the New York Times, about what's happening in New York. And it's like, there's landlords that are reporting that 80% of their customers are missing rent, which is going to have an absolutely catastrophic potential consequence, right? Because if they miss rent, eventually landlords miss mortgage payments, and then if that happens, then banks like you can have entire economies collapse, and that is because of this, like, all these little individual small businesses that employ a few people and move money and support other businesses internally. And so it's this thing where I think we all have said it, but I don't think that people have actually believed, or maybe if they have believed, they haven't actually understood how important that really is. And so when we say the backbone, as cliche as that sounds, like full stop, that's what it is. And so, you know, I think, and I don't know if this is getting off track at all, but with what's happening right now with everything with COVID-19, it's like that is where the focus should have been, is like, how do we keep these small businesses running, which employ most of our people, which contributes drastically to our GDP. And if you had focused on that, then it's like, I think that this whole thing would have been a little bit smoother. And then not to mention, aside from the economic impact, you know, you have the societal impact, the community impact. This is where people gather and they swap stories and they do business with each other and they support each other. You know, it's like that is it. You know, it's like, and big business and huge, large companies, enterprises, vitally important as well, because those support a lot of the services and the systems that these small businesses use to run on. But yeah, so I mean, it depends which way you want to talk about it. But I think, I mean, I hope that answers your question. Anyway, I don't know.
No, like, well, it's good. It segues into just a topic I want to chat about, and that's if you look at different industries and kind of how they're faring. Like in the US, there was a marketplace article that, you know, recently questioned the idea of co-working business models. And they said, you know, there will always be a need for the co-working space, but we're questioning the extent of it, the extent of like having the co-working space. Like people are becoming cognitive of personal hygiene. They want to shift away from densely shared office space. Some office shared like companies are looking for business models that attract larger, more established companies. So like what might be ways to transfer the co-working business model for you in the future? Like what are you thinking we need to do to move the co-working model forward?
You know, I actually think that medium to long term, COVID-19 has been like the greatest thing ever for the co-working model. I think it has shown companies of all sizes, small, medium, large enterprise, that remote work is viable to a certain degree. I think people think that we're being more productive than we are right now because everybody is working at home. I think as soon as some people are working at home and some people aren't, we'll realize that there is this disconnect that results in lower productivity than what people realize right now. However, I think it's showing that it's possible. There's massive tech companies and other companies that are saying we're going to go fully distributed or remote workforce. And remote does not mean work at home. Remote means not working in the same corporate office every single day. And I think that co-working is going to form a huge part of this flexibility that companies and employees of those companies are craving and now understanding can actually contribute to happiness and productivity. And so even in the last week or two, you know, it's only the end of May right now, and you know, we've had a spike of inquiries from these like small to mid-sized companies that have traditional leases that realize we don't need this traditional lease. We don't need a whole floor or half a floor of space. Some of our people are going to work from home, some aren't, but people don't want to work at home all the time, but they want that flexibility. Enter co-working. And for us anyway, we've never been as focused on slamming in as many people per square foot as we can. We've always had a huge amount of open area, especially compared to a lot of other co-working operators, especially the big guys or the multinationals or the US-based companies. But even without that though, you know, I think it honestly goes to show that it's just like this level of flexibility is not only viable, but it is welcomed and may result in increased productivity and employee happiness. And to be honest, this is the stuff that all Work Nicer members already knew, right? They've been years ahead of plenty of other people. And I would like to applaud our customers and our members for realizing that. And so I think generally speaking, when you talk to real estate experts and globally, most of them will say that remote work or co-working or flex office, like whatever term they're using, has incredible long-term potential. And I actually think that like my biggest concern right now, honestly, if I'm thinking even remotely futuristic, is that we're going to have a drastic supply problem. because the, even our members right now, our members don't want to leave. They just need a help. Like they just need help financially. They're not trying to cancel, right? It's like they're like, we want to be here. This is a part of it. We realize how important Work Nicer is to us and to our day to day. But because of what everything that's happening, we just need some financial assistance in order to make it through. But they want to help us as well. And I think that this is just opening the eyes of a lot of other people to potentially see the same thing.
Like if we go into kind of the psyche of your members, it is a scary time, for small business right now, and it's hard to know what to do next. Like two main concerns, obviously, are the short-term working capital needs and the revenue you'll need to renew your business. Like you've kind of already mentioned that. Like, what is Work Nicer's community? Like, what's the take on what to do next for the individual businesses?
Yeah. Well, in terms of viability and survivability, or how do you mean?
Yeah, just because you're going to have a swath of different businesses. Some might even be, benefiting from the changes, but there's probably like a community of thought in terms of, okay, what do we need to do to, get on the other side?
Yeah, I think, well, I can tell you kind of what we've done. Well, my opinion here, I think, is that the businesses that add value will always win. And that's it. And that's why it's like, and I think you and I are going to get into this a little bit later, but we talk about Work Nicer's guiding principles. And our number one is to, provide preposterous value without the nonsense. And so throughout this whole thing, that has been, crazy emphasized and that much more important. We say, hey, one of the things that we've offered in the past has been physical workspace. That is less available or less desired at the moment, and that's fine. How do we continue to add preposterous or extra value? And so, we've moved very quickly into connecting people online, adding workshops, providing we provided work from home setups where we would take desks and workstations to people's houses. We worked with our partners to provide at-home services for people that need it, like window washing and gutter cleaning and house cleaning if they needed it. We're rolling out kind of like a wellness program, which will include access to remote healthcare for members. And so, and this isn't meant to be like a pitch of all the cool stuff we're doing, but it's just like, that takes a lot of time and resources. So we've doubled down on trying to say, hey, how can we continue to add value during this time? Because the reality is we want to give people all the reasons to not leave. And I think that we've retained, I think it's 96 or 94% of our customers. That doesn't mean that we've retained that much revenue, right? Those are the people, a lot of them are paying less, and I'm sure we'll get into that in a little bit. But I think all you can do now is meet your customers where they're at, do what you can to add value while still sticking true to where you're at. I think it's not some people would think that right now, hey, what do you need to do to survive, or what does a small business need to do? And a lot of people would think, well, we need to go make masks. Work Nicer doesn't know, as an example, it doesn't need to go make masks, but I think some companies are just trying to do anything that doesn't necessarily connect with the core of who they are, which might raise the question of, do they know who they are at the core? That's a whole other conversation, probably. But I think the reality is like, communicate, in my opinion, communicate with your customers, be vulnerable and transparent, tell them what you're going to do for them, and ask them what they can do for you. Because especially now, it's like we are all in the same boat. And so it's like none of us will last if we don't all work together to a certain extent.
Yeah, and actually, I heard you mention Seth Godin's book, The Dip, a little while ago. And there's a good quote in there that I'd like to read. It's, winners quit all the time. They just quit the right stuff at the right time. Now, with that quote and what Seth's getting at, it's not really about quitting. It's know when to quit. Just because it's hard, it doesn't mean it's time to quit. And the time for opportunity comes after the pain. Do you feel that there's some truth in that?
Yes. At the early stages of this whole thing, as a team, we read the dip together, because we said this is the dip for us, right? It's like, and it's just starting. And I still think, in a lot of ways, we're not coming out of it yet. I still think that we are like maybe just coming to like the starting line, not the finish line. I think a lot of people, but that's another conversation potentially. But yeah, no, I think that was it. It's like, hey, we are going to choose, like, we are going to define how we come out of this, not be defined by it, right? And I think that is the biggest thing, is just, but also knowing, like, yeah, when do we, like, what do you call quits and when? So a good example of that is, like, we've effectively quit events, right? We would run a lot of events in physical spaces. Those are essentially illegal at the moment. There was always a question of whether or not those are core to value and business model. And so it's like, what was the value we were hoping to get out of events at the best of times? Let's channel that intent into some other vertical or some other offering. And then we'll kind of have to see how that goes. So I think there's going to be lots of things that we quit throughout this, but that doesn't mean that you just like full on quit everything, right? But maybe it does. Like, maybe there are certain people that should say, hey, now is the time for me to quit that business, start this other thing that I want to do. And there's nothing wrong with that either. But the reality is that you're right. Just because it's hard doesn't mean you should be quitting, because the things that are worth sticking to are actually about to get even harder, right?
With the pandemic, we've talked about your values, and I want to go through them. The one that you said was to provide preposterous value without the nonsense. The second is to enable dramatic impact without drama. The third is to do what's hard because growth comes with the struggle. And then the fourth is do what's right because character is all we really have. So how do you keep true to those principles? And how do you use them to adapt?
Yeah. I've actually really liked this time for this reason. There's a lot of reasons I don't like this time, but it's actually made things very easy from like a decision-making perspective, right? Because, and we've always leaned into these during the difficult decisions. So even when things are good, we've always asked, should we do this thing or partner with this person or this company or provide this office to this different customer and align those with these values. So for us, it was truly just a continued exercise of how to do this right. And so there's a lot of scenarios where, we're considering how to move forward in uncertain times, and we can just measure that against these questions. And so, for example, like enabling dramatic impact without the drama, the thing that comes to my head is how we are laying out and designing workspace now, as more and more people are going to start coming back. And I think, a lot of people are, a lot of companies, not just co-working, but like tons of different industries, for example, they say, we're not going to open yet because we don't feel that it's safe or something. I'm like, that to me is creating drama, because it's like, who are you to say that you are the expert and know more than the people that are telling you that it's safe to open? And then second to that is that this has never been about safety. This has been about flattening the curve and ensuring that our hospital or our healthcare system can handle this. And so to me, it's like, it's been really important, like, especially in a time like this, it's like, yeah, we cannot enable drama, right? Like, we cannot perpetuate drama. We cannot perpetuate hype. We have an opportunity as a leader to educate versus perpetuate. That's one thing that we're saying kind of internally. And so that's made it pretty easy. It's like, oh, is this thing that we're doing, is it enabling dramatic impact, or is it facilitating drama? Right? And so it allows us to make those things relatively simple and measure that against what we're being told by public health authorities and so on and so forth.
Now, these are all very much, strategic business kind of topics that we've talked about. Like, how about yourself personally? Like, how did you feel going through this experience? Like from, at the beginning of COVID to now, do you feel like you're in a different space?
You know, I do. I was actually thinking about this just like yesterday, quite extensively, like just internal reflection, because on one hand, this is when I perform my best. Like I've always been a procrastinator, and I perform well when my back is up against the wall. It's not necessarily the healthiest thing, but it is a thing that I've always done. Like going back to even school, right? I would leave papers up until, the morning of, or 5 a.m. or whatever. And so I think I'm kind of in a way a sucker for punishment. And so I do well and I can push through. But I do find myself at relative peace because we're actively taking steps and constantly analyzing and creating strategy on how to move forward with relationships and landlords and discussions and negotiations, but also with our members and being transparent in our team and sticking to core values, right? And so, thanks. And so, honestly, it's like, yes, I am a little bit different because I think any kind of significant like first bump that I got from an uncertainty perspective, I kind of quickly settled back into that feeling of just grind through and push to make it happen. And the reality is, it's like for true entrepreneurs, this is actually in a lot of ways not much different from the day to day. It's like problems are thrown at you and you figure out solutions to the problems. Like this is just another problem to solve. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Hey, Alex, you know what? To end, I'd like to ask you a question. That's, what would you tell leaders to do right now to support entrepreneurs and to support the entrepreneur community? Like you're doing your best, but like, would there be a wider message that you'd want to tell people?
I think in the time of right now during COVID-19, I honestly think like the biggest thing is like not to perpetuate hype or hysteria. I think that we need to take this thing seriously and we need to listen to the government and do what we're told. But I think there's a lot of people that are taking this way too far based on their own opinion. And frankly, none of us know better than the next person. And so if we trust our government, the best way to lead is to follow. And so it's like, let's follow what we're being told to do that thing and do it really well and follow the rules. But like, don't act like you're some hero that knows more or that you're going to take some extra step because you are so great. It's, like we need the economy to get back to it. Like we need to get back to this. We shouldn't do that and sacrifice anything, but let's just listen to the rules. And I think I don't know, that's my biggest thing. I'm just seeing it, and it's kind of a hot topic and a lot of people don't necessarily agree with me, but I don't love it when I see people saying we're not going to open because it's not safe, or we're going to go and do this extra stuff from a mitigation perspective. It's just like if you want to be a leader, listen to your leaders.
Yeah, and the other part of it might be just be that calm and have a game plan to make sure other people are able to follow you with confidence.
Yeah.
So, Alex, like I love what you do at Work Nicer. Every time I've stepped in the building, there's such a great feeling of camaraderie, great culture. I can't wait to see you get back up to full strength. And thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. Good to see you again, even though it's virtual, and excited to see you again IRL very soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thank you for your support. Please remember to click subscribe so we can bring you more remarkable interviews with extraordinary leaders.